Welcome to Congress in Context, your shortcut to understanding the pulse of Washington. This week, we're diving deep into what was, well, an incredibly active period in the Senate, even with the House out of session.
That's right. It really was quite packed.
Our mission today is to pull back that curtain, decode some of the key debates, and help you grasp the implications of actions taken and, importantly, those maybe deliberately stalled. We're talking everything from national security and the economy right through to some highly sensitive investigations.
Yeah, and it was a week that really showed, the two sides of the legislature. What's kind of fascinating is that even with some pretty intense partisan clashes happening, the Senate actually managed to pass several important pieces of legislation, things that affect people's lives.
Right. It's easy to just focus on the conflict.
Exactly. You get lost in the noise, but, there's real legislative work that does get done sometimes. So maybe let's shine a light on some of that first.
That sounds like a great place to start. So beyond the big headlines, what specific bills actually crossed the finish line this past week?
Well, there were some genuinely significant bipartisan moments, actually. For instance, a bill passed, S. 2682, designating the VA Medical Center in West Haven, Connecticut. It's in honor of Medal of Honor recipient Captain Paul W. Bucha.
Oh, I think I read about him. Quite a story.
A remarkable figure, yeah. Not just for his service, but really for his advocacy for veterans' mental health. He actually coined the term post-traumatic stress, crucially, without the disorder part to help fight stigma.
That's powerful.
And he sought care himself at the very facility now named after him, and even donated his brain for research. So it's a really profound tribute.
Sounds incredibly fitting. Were there other recognitions like that for veterans?
Absolutely. Another bill, H.R. 2170, passed naming the VA clinic down in Toms River, New Jersey, after Leonard G. Bud Lomel. And sort of related, the Senate passed a resolution, SRA 370, commending the Superdome on its Golden Jubilee.
Ah, the Superdome.
Yeah, recognizing its service not just to Louisiana, but housing thousands during hurricanes like George's and Katrina, a real civic landmark.
Okay, so moments of national recognition. What about things like public safety, or maybe those technical updates that often fly under the radar?
Yeah, good question. On the public safety front, the Senate passed SRES 369, designating August 21st, 2025 as Fentanyl Prevention and Awareness Day. It really highlights fentanyl as a massive public safety threat. It was noted as the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 in 2024.
Such a critical issue.
Definitely. And then there were technical corrections like S. 1155 for the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 and H.R. 2808, the Homebuyers Privacy Protection Act. That one's aimed at preventing consumer reporting agencies from just handing out reports under certain circumstances, sort of a consumer protection thing.
Okay, so a productive week passing individual bills, but I also kept hearing this phrase, one big beautiful bill. What was that all about?
Ah, yes. This is where you see some, let's say, strategic legislative packaging. The night before all this, 3 separate appropriations bills were passed. That itself was a significant bipartisan effort, actually.
Okay.
What's notable is it marked the first time those kinds of bills got passed before the August recess, since way back in 2018.
That is interesting.
So proponents of what they dubbed this one big beautiful bill, basically rolling those 3 together, claimed it achieved several big things. They said it eliminated, quote, far-left Green New Deal spending, modernized the military, and fully funded Border Patrol.
So bundling things together for a bigger impact.
Exactly. It's a common strategy. It can secure broader wins, but, it can also make scrutinizing the individual parts a bit harder for the public.
And what about the economic promises tied to that package? I remember hearing some pretty substantial numbers being thrown around.
Yes. The projections they presented were quite eye-catching. It was claimed the bill would save Tennesseans, specifically, $2,600 per year in taxes. And they projected an increase of maybe $7,000 to $10,000 in take-home pay for families nationally.
Wow, that's significant.
Yeah, proponents even called it the largest tax cut in our nation's history. So framing it as a major economic win directly for households.
Okay, so from those legislative wins, let's pivot to where things clearly got more contentious. The Senate floor itself, it sounds like it was a real battleground, and maybe nowhere more so than the fight over executive nominations. This is where the political dynamics really flare up, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this really gets to the heart of shifting institutional norms, how things are done, or maybe not done anymore. The majority side forcefully argued that Democrats were engaged in, and this is their term, historic and unprecedented obstruction of President Trump's civilian nominees.
Historic and unprecedented. Strong words.
Very. And they backed it up with a pretty stark statistic. In the first 6+ months of this administration, exactly 0 nominees have been confirmed by a simple voice vote or unanimous consent.
0. How does that actually compare historically? Is 0 really that unusual?
It really is. I mean, the comparison is quite dramatic. If you look back, George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, 98% confirmed that way.
98%.
George W. Bush and Barack Obama, it was 90%. Even the first Trump term saw 65%, and the Biden administration had 57%.
So 0 is, that's a significant drop-off.
It's a cliff, basically.
Yeah.
And the argument from the majority was, look, these nominees aren't being held up for policy reasons, but, quote, not for leverage in partisan games, but to score political points at the expense of public safety.
And this slowdown meant spending a lot more time on each individual nominee, right? I heard it described as taking hours per confirmation.
That's right. Effectively, one nominee every 2 hours was the description used. There's clear frustration about this perceived delay tactic. It even led to threats of major rules changes in the Senate to kind of force things through.
But some did get through eventually.
Some did, yes,
Yeah.
but they required roll call votes and, crucially, cloture motions. Cloture is that procedure to end debate, overcome a filibuster, essentially.
Right.
So, for example, Andrew Puzder for EU ambassador, cloture passed, then confirmed 53-44. Others included Jason Redding Quinones and Jeanine Pirro as U.S. attorneys. Those are tight cloture votes, too. Also, Luke Lindbergh at Agriculture, Adam Telly for the Army, Marcus Molinaro as Federal Transit Administrator, Catherine Hansen at EPA, and Sean Cairncross as National Cyber Director. They all got confirmed, but often after these procedural hurdles.
Okay, so the majority is clearly pointing the finger at the minority for this slowdown. What's the counter-argument? What context should listeners consider here?
Well, the minority pushed back hard. Their core argument was, essentially, historically bad nominees deserve historic levels of scrutiny. They claimed these specific nominees were, quote, flawed, compromised, and unqualified.
So it's about the quality of the nominees, in their view.
That's the claim. And they also brought up precedents. They pointed to what they call the J.D. Vance precedent. That refers to when the former senator blocked unanimous consent for dozens of U.S. attorney nominees under Biden's 63 appointments, apparently and explicitly said he wanted to, quote, grind the Department of Justice to a halt.
Ah, so they're saying this isn't entirely new.
Exactly. Turnabout is fair play, perhaps is the underlying message. They also cited the stolen seat precedent regarding Supreme Court nominations when Republicans under Obama refused even a hearing for his nominee.
Right, the Merrick Garland situation.
Precisely. So there's a belief, or at least an argument from the minority side, that the number of nominees approved under Trump now is actually almost exactly the same as under Biden at a similar point. They suggest the historic obstruction claim is maybe hyperbole.
Interesting.
And there was specific pointed criticism, too. For example, the president's choice for U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro. Concerns were raised that she was unfit, could undermine the DOJ, maybe even investigate prosecutors who went after attackers of law enforcement.
So it really highlights the deep divisions over what's legitimate oversight versus what's just obstruction.
And how history gets used, selectively by both sides to justify their current actions.
Yeah.
It's complex.
Okay, moving from the nomination battles, another really intense debate flared up around the Jeffrey Epstein files. This is obviously incredibly sensitive, very emotionally charged. What's the main demand coming from Congress on this?
Yeah, the demand for full transparency here is really strong, and understandably so, given what's described as a massive network of sex trafficking of young girls to powerful men. Senator Merkley, for one, proposed a specific bill, S-2557, to actually compel the Department of Justice to release these files, but crucially with victim names redacted to protect their privacy. The focus is on exposing the perpetrators.
Right, protect the victims, expose the powerful.
Yeah.
What are the specific controversies swirling around these files right now? What allegations are being made?
Well, there's several, and they're deeply concerning. First, there was a Bloomberg report claiming, quote, the FBI redacted Trump's name in the Epstein files.
Redacted his name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which immediately raised the question, why redact someone's name if their role was supposedly, innocent? This was then amplified by a whistleblower disclosure alleging that Attorney General Pam Bondi actually pressured the FBI during their review, telling them to specifically flag any records mentioning President Trump.
That sounds problematic.
It certainly raises questions. And then there's this highly unusual interview with Ghislaine Maxwell herself.
Oh, right. Tell us about that.
Well, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who it's really important to note, used to be President Trump's personal lawyer, conducted a secret interview with Maxwell.
Secret interview by the deputy AG.
Yes. Described as highly inappropriate and unprecedented, and it raised immediate red flags. Concerns about Blanche's potential ongoing duty of loyalty and confidentiality to his former client, President Trump.
Of course.
Also, the lawyers representing Epstein's victims were apparently excluded from this interview.
Really?
And then not long after, Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security prison. Critics immediately suggested this looked like she was being rewarded for something said in that interview.
That timing certainly looks suspicious to critics, and the president himself weighed in on Maxwell.
He did. President Trump publicly acknowledged his power to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell.
He talked about pardoning her.
He acknowledged he could, which instantly sparked accusations of potential witness tampering. Was it a signal to her for, favorable testimony or silence? There were immediate calls for him to renounce that power, with some saying pretty bluntly that in any normal circumstances that would be seen as witness tampering. And adding another layer, Senator Wyden has been doing this long investigation, like 3.5 years, focused on the money side. Follow the money, right? His probe revealed the Treasury Department apparently holds thousands of Epstein documents. And it raised serious concerns that the IRS might not have investigated potentially hundreds of millions of dollars paid by, quote, ultra-wealthy individuals to a known sex trafficker, possibly to dodge billions in taxes.
So a massive financial dimension as well, given all this concern. Was there any actual legislative action on the floor related to preserving these files?
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting politically. An amendment was proposed by Senator Van Hollen to one of those appropriations bills, the Commerce, Justice, Science one. It required the DOJ to basically retain, preserve, and compile all Epstein-related records and give Congress a comprehensive report within 60 days.
Okay, that sounds straightforward.
And it specifically allowed victim names to be redacted, but explicitly said, quote, perpetrators should not have their names redacted. Now, here's the thing. That amendment passed unanimously in the Senate Appropriations Committee. Every single member, Republican and Democrat, voted yes.
Unanimously in committee, so it should have sailed through on the floor, right?
You'd think so.
Nope.
When they tried to get immediate passage on the Senate floor, it was objected to. Someone blocked it.
Objected to preserving records.
Exactly. And senators who supported it were openly frustrated, asking, why would anyone object to just protecting these records from being destroyed?
Yeah.
It really shows how even something with unanimous committee support can hit a political wall on the floor, especially with sensitive topics.
That's a really stark contrast. Unanimous support, then a floor objection. Wow. Okay, let's pivot now to the economy. Tariffs were another huge flashpoint with just incredibly different viewpoints.
Oh, absolutely. Polar opposites.
And what's so tricky here is trying to figure out the actual impact of something like tariffs, right? Because each side presents data, sometimes compelling data, that seems to back up their argument. Let's start with the pro-tariff side. What were they saying?
So on the pro-tariff side, we heard from an Ohio senator who was citing specific small business owners in his state. People like Dr. Nick Jarmozuk from a company called Skylift, Belinda Durham, a used car dealer. They were reporting that their businesses were thriving, orders were up.
Okay.
They claimed customers were actually coming back from Chinese suppliers because of the tariffs. Ken Savage from Velocity Concept Development Group felt the trade situation would become more equitable. Jack Schron from Juergens Inc. said his factories were going gangbusters, partly due to new orders from customers trying to avoid tariffs. And Donnie Chaplin from Grand River Rubber and Plastics saw a rush of new inquiries, bringing in millions in new business.
So direct anecdotes of benefit from these business owners. What were the broader economic claims being made from that perspective?
Well, the main argument was that tariffs are successfully bringing manufacturing back to America. They pointed to data like U.S.-made car sales increasing from about 51% up to 56%, and they said heading towards the 60s. They claimed it was creating more jobs for native-born Americans, boosting private sector employment overall. They also highlighted what they called record levels of tariff revenue, almost $150 billion collected. And importantly, they argued, inflation was actually at its lowest point in 4 years, and real wages were up almost 4%, quote, eclipsing inflation.
So tariffs helping, not hurting inflation in their view?
That was the argument presented, yes. They also cited union leaders like Sean Fain of the UAW and Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters as being supportive of these policies.
Okay.
And there was a political element, too, accusing Democrats of blocking other tax cuts like eliminating income tax on tips or overtime, a bigger child tax credit, these $1,000 Trump accounts. And they specifically pushed back against the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's stance on small businesses and tariffs.
All right, that's a very optimistic picture from the pro-tariff side. How did the anti-tariff argument counter this? How did they see the impact?
It was a completely different story. A Massachusetts senator argued that small businesses are the ones being disproportionately harmed, turning Main Street, as they put it, into Pain Street. The argument there is that tariffs essentially act like a sales tax, just causing prices to go up for everyone.
Right, the pass-through cost.
Exactly. This perspective pointed to a concerning inflation reading recently and also a very discouraging jobs report. And they made sure to note that this jobs report was followed by President Trump firing the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Ah, yes, that happened.
And there was real concern expressed that the Federal Reserve actually can't lower interest rates right now, precisely because of the inflation risk potentially fueled by tariffs.
Were there specific examples given of how consumers might be seeing these rising costs?
Yes, very specific examples. Coffee prices reportedly up 30%, and there was even a threat of a 50% tariff on Brazil, linked to some legal case there.
50% on coffee? Wow.
Yeah. Grocery prices overall up 2.4% annually, but expected to rise maybe another 3.4% soon. Fresh produce could jump as much as 6.9%, and clothing costs were highlighted as being up a, quote, staggering 37.5%.
37% on clothes. That's huge.
It is. And countering the manufacturing claims, this side highlighted a loss of 37,000 manufacturing jobs just in the last 3 months, arguing tariffs are actually setting manufacturing back.
So job loss is not gains in manufacturing.
That was their data point, yes.
And what about the broader human impact? Who gets hurt most by tariffs, according to this view?
The warning was that tariffs disproportionately affect low-income individuals, women, and minorities because they spend a larger portion of their income on basic goods, which are now more expensive. The argument concluded that rising prices would make everyday items and even the upcoming holiday season less joyful, and that small businesses face tough choices between stocking shelves and paying their workers.
So what was the proposed solution from this side?
They urged passage of something called the Small Business Liberation Act, which would basically exempt small businesses from these tariffs. And they noted that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce does support these kinds of exclusions.
So two completely different narratives drawn from the same economic policy really illustrates the complexity.
Absolutely. It shows how difficult it is to get a clear picture and how data can be framed very differently.
Okay, so beyond these really big, contentious debates, nominations, Epstein, tariffs, what other legislative initiatives popped up, any other broader issues Congress touched on this week?
Yeah, there were definitely other things happening. New bills were introduced, like S-2680, which proposes tougher sentencing for fraud if it's committed by elected officials. There was also S-2681, the Lowering Electric Bills Act, aimed at extending some clean energy tax credits.
Okay.
And on a completely different note, a cultural recognition. S-368 was introduced to commemorate the semi-centennial, the 50th anniversary of hip-hop.
Hip-hop's 50th. Right. And what about the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA? That's always a huge piece of legislation.
It is indeed. And there were significant amendments proposed to this year's NDAA, which is S-2296. These included things like efforts to repurpose frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. Big focus there.
Makes sense.
Also, enhancing the security of those vital subsea fiber optic cables. Developing a strategy for federal agencies to migrate to post-quantum cryptography, preparing for future code-breaking threats, and authorizing expanded contractor services down at the southern border. So really reflecting current national security priorities and tech challenges.
It's also important to remember, isn't it, that Congress doesn't just react to D.C. events. It's supposed to be responsive to concerns from across the country. Did we see any examples of that this week, maybe input from a state legislature?
That's a really great point. And yes, we did. There were petitions and memorials submitted from the Montana legislature, which gave a direct window into citizen concerns shaping the agenda up here.
Montana. What were their specific requests?
They called for federal action on several key fronts. Energy and permitting was a big one. They urged streamlining regulations for domestic energy production, hydro, wind, geothermal, nuclear, critical minerals. They cited national security, but also the huge energy demand coming from AI development.
Ah, the AI power crunch.
Exactly. And they specifically asked the EPA to review and maybe undo recent power plant regulations like the MAS RTR rule and the GHG rule. They argued these rules hinder building essential energy infrastructure and make the U.S. more vulnerable.
Okay, energy. What else was on Montana's list?
Wildfires, a huge issue out west, obviously. They urged for aggressive initial attack on wildfires starting on federal lands, keeping forest roads open for access, and importantly, including wildfire smoke in EPA air quality standards.
Including the smoke itself.
Yes, noting it's often the biggest source of air pollution in Montana communities during fire season. And finally, they called for Montanans to be included in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, RECA. They pointed out that Montana actually has 15 of the top 25 most impacted downwind counties from those old above-ground nuclear tests.
Wow. That really shows how specific state issues can and should filter up to the federal level.
Absolutely. It's a direct link.
So as this very active week in the Senate mostly winds down for the recess, what's immediately on the horizon when they get back?
Well, the Senate is technically in what's called pro forma session until Tuesday, September 2nd. That basically means very short formal meetings, no real legislative business. It's mainly to satisfy constitutional rules and prevent certain presidential actions like recess appointments.
Got it. So September 2nd is the key date.
Right. A really key vote is scheduled for that day.
Yeah.
A cloture vote on the motion to proceed to the National Defense Authorization Act, S. 2296.
So a vote just to start debating the defense bill.
Exactly. It determines if that huge bill can even move forward for full debate and amendments. So it's a crucial first hurdle. And you can bet that the ongoing fights over nominations, the Epstein Files transparency, and tariffs, those aren't going away. They'll almost certainly continue to dominate the agenda well into the fall.
Which brings us right back to you, the listener. All these seemingly abstract debates happening in Senate hearing rooms and on the floor, nominations, transparency, trade policy, they really do have a direct impact. They impact your daily life, the economy you live in, and frankly, the integrity of our national institutions.
Yeah, and the dynamics we talked about, cooperation versus obstruction, it's not just political sport. It's about how efficiently our government can actually function and deliver results that affect families, businesses, national security. It matters.
And if you want to dig deeper yourself, remember the Congressional Record is public. You can find it on congress.gov. You can read the full debates, the actual text of the bills we discussed.
We really encourage you to do that. Research the bills, understand the different arguments, maybe even reach out to your own representatives. Your engagement really is key to how these things play out.
So as Congress heads into this August recess, maybe we're left with a question to ponder. When does political strategy cross the line and become institutional sabotage? And what does that ultimately mean for the government's ability to function for the people it's supposed to serve?